I think it's 100% about intention, 100% about who you are as an artist, and 100% about your talent and the execution of the story and the product. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Tetrimuse podcast. My name is James King, and we're going to be talking about music branding on this podcast today. And if that's something you're interested in, then I'm super glad to have you here, and I hope you find some value in some of the things I'm going to share with you today. Last week, I talked about consumer touch points and becoming the creative director of your brand. And that episode was mostly focused towards building creative assets and how to do so in a way that can help connect with your audience. If that's something that you're looking for and you're interested in learning more about, I'd highly recommend going and checking out that podcast. Today, we're going to kind of piggyback off that one, and we're going to talk about 3 ways to help you take more control of your branding in hopes that it will give you a better idea of where to go with your brand and how to communicate your brand to your target audience. Not too long ago, I was working for a company as a brand manager, and in this company, we oftentimes received creative assets from individuals who wanted to create communications for their sales goals or for their marketing purposes. But the problem was we had a lot of non-designers trying to design work, and typically what happens is when you have non-designers designing creative, it's not good enough from a corporate distribution perspective. And even though it was coming from a place of love and a place of wanting to do something positive, have positive impact for the company, the creative assets weren't on par with where they needed to go, and oftentimes weren't even on brand. We had people using other colors than the brand. We had people using JPEG images in the wrong way. So there's a lot of these little details that if you aren't in the design community, you don't really understand them. And it's definitely a rabbit hole you can go down forever when you're starting to talk about how to use design elements. But when it comes to the creative, you want something that's going to communicate your business. So when we're talking about taking hold of your branding, what we're really talking about is understanding how to put your best foot forward, as well as the best foot that's going to represent you as a product, or you as a musician, or you as an artist, to try and communicate those things to your audience. What I want to see happen is that your core branding starts to become something that you start becoming very intentional about, and that you start taking a hold of, because if you don't do that, then you might be missing the communication piece of what good creative can do for you. So that got me thinking about this podcast and ways that maybe I can help steer you guys in a direction that can help you take more hold on your branding. So that way, when you're putting out those communication pieces, you're not putting out something that's off brand, and that you're starting to align yourself with who you are as a musician and technically a product. And that way your community knows what they're participating in. I've broken this up into 3 different sections, and today that's going to start off with number 1, which is make brand as important of an investment as you would your album or equipment that you're investing into. Okay, what I mean by that is I see a lot of times we get gear acquisition syndrome. For anybody who's never heard that term, we call it gas in the creative world. So if you do photography, if you do music, if you do recording, all of those things that require you to get gear, we call it gear acquisition syndrome. And it's something that I see a lot of people, even including myself, get hung up on, because oftentimes we feel like we got to have the best gear in order to create our best creative. But what I want people to do is change the mentality that it's not just about the album. It's about the holistic product that you're putting together, which is led by you. What this got me thinking about was something I learned in college. It was kind of a revelatory moment for me. And I was in my art history class, and we were talking about Jackson Pollock. For anyone who doesn't know who Jackson Pollock is, he was a painter in the 1900s who changed the narrative of what painting was at the time. And essentially what he said is we don't need to have an easel and a brush to create art. And love him or hate him, he has mixed reviews. Jackson Pollock's narrative became almost as important as the execution of the art, maybe more important than the execution of the art. And this was like a game-changing moment for me in my creative career, because I realized oftentimes I think we focus too much on the execution of the product. We don't put enough of the story and the narrative into why we're creating that product. And that's where the art lies. The art is the conversation of, well, this is why I'm creating this piece of art. And then sometimes the execution is just to put in place the idea. So we want to try and be able to do both. We want to be able to get to this point where you're creating this narrative as an artist of why you're doing what you're doing. And then you're going out there and you're executing on that narrative in hopes that your talent and your capability and the narrative will be symbiotic and be a holistic product that is well done. And just a fun fact about that, I read that in 2016, one of his paintings sold for $200 million. That is the power of narrative. Instead of thinking about all of this as, okay, I got to put all my money into equipment, or I've got to put all my money into the album, or I need to put all my money into marketing, distribution, or branding, I want you guys to start thinking about this from how do you build up the narrative? Because I think it's 100% about intention, 100% about who you are as an artist, and 100% about your talent and the execution of the story and the product. Now, those three things together, I think, make up the holistic product, which is essentially you, what you're distributing, as well as the story behind it. Okay, number 2. So this is core brand and campaign branding. I wanted to talk about this because I think it's important to establish that there's 2 types of branding that I would approach this as. So one is your core brand. And the core brand is what we talked about in episodes 2 and 3. That is where we go in and we deep dive in on things like cultural significance, your values, XYZ. That makes up your core brand, and you need an identity that represents that core brand. So who you are as an individual, how you're going to portray yourself across all your social media platforms. You want a core brand and identity to that, and an understanding of how to be intentional with the brand that you're creating. Now, there's also the campaign brand side, which is when you start putting theme to product. And a really great example of this is somebody like Taylor Swift. So if you look at Taylor Swift and the history of her albums, you can see that there's a theme to each one aesthetically, right? There's Taylor as who Taylor is as a brand and as an individual, but there's also these campaign themes that she's putting to each album. And typically, I think that if you're going to do an album, this makes sense to do a theme to it and to wrap everything that you have, like your website, your social medias, your Spotify, distribution platforms like that. You're going to want to use the campaign branding if you're putting out an album. Now, it gets a little harder when you're talking about putting out singles. You can do that with singles, but it probably makes more sense to keep your core brand and then have a single have a smaller identity to it, which is more like your album cover and maybe some creative assets that help promote that single. So I would put that underneath more of the core brand side. And what you're going to need for those two is your brand guidelines and brand guardrails. This is something I learned when I was working the corporate side. Now, when you have a brand guideline, that's essentially you saying, okay, here's my core brand. Here's the colors. Here's the logo. Here's how to use imagery. Here's how to use the typography. That is your brand guideline. But something I learned as I was going through the process of trying to create a system for the employees to use, I needed to build brand guardrails. Now, this to me is more when you put things into action. So if I have somebody out in my business that wants to create creative assets, how can I empower them to start creating content that's on brand? They need brand guardrails. They're not going to understand everything about a brand guideline because we're talking about application here. We're not talking about just fundamentals, right? We're talking about building assets. So you're going to need some brand guardrails, especially if you're going to be talking to people about how to build these assets for you. And there's 2 ways that you can go about building assets for your brand. One is more the DIY side of things, and the other is to hire out the content. I am personally am a DIY type of artist. I like the creative process. I like photography. I do design. I love videography, right? But there are a lot of people out there who can't create those assets. They're not even interested in doing that. And that's okay. That's totally okay. You don't have to love it. But one of the hard things about where we're at with the music industry, where we don't have labels helping us build teams to create the content for us, we have to do a lot of that ourselves. So what I'm saying here is you need to start taking more of the DIY approach, but you can also hire people out to do the creative assets and the creative work for you. So what I would recommend doing is take the brand guidelines that you've built, go back and listen to some of the podcasts that I've done previously, check out how to do your values, how to find cultural significance, who your target demographic is, start building out your core brand, and then take some adjectives, go out and build a mood board, start making a mood board for your brand, and then you can go out there and find an artist who can create the content for you based on what you have for your brand and for your mood board. Now, something I want to do coming up, I want to do a video that shows you how I approach making a mood board. I think that will kind of help all of these episodes that I've been doing kind of come to an actionable piece that maybe will help you guys understand how to create content and how to lead out on your content. So keep an eye out on that. I just want to make sure that I do it right. Some of the cool things about the DIY side though, if you're nerdy like me and you love photography and you love cameras, the DIY side has gotten really good. The first camera that I bought was about 10 years ago. It was a Canon 60D. And I was so excited to have this because I thought, oh, now I can start taking pictures of myself. I don't need to hire out a photographer to do these things for me. But at the time, the technology wasn't there that could track your eye. So I had to rely more on other people to help me create content. But with the advent of new technologies like the mirrorless stuff that's coming out, it's unbelievable what you can do with those. You can go out there, you can get your phone, you can tap in focus where you want the focus to be, you can pose, and you can take a photo of yourself. It's unbelievable. And then you have platforms like Canva that are out there that have templates that have pieces of content that you can already pull from to get creative assets to put onto the photography that you're shooting. We're living in a world right now that really empowers the independent artist or creative to make enough content to push out into distribution. I would highly recommend checking out some of the tools to be able to empower you to get there. But you need that core fundamental, that core foundation of who you are and what your brand is. So that way you know what you're trying to build and you can go out there and structure your creative pieces on top of that foundational branding you've already created. Okay, moving into topic number 3. Collaboration. I think collaboration is one of the most important aspects of creative. And as I was working at the company I was at previously, for a while I was the sole designer. It was just me trying to create content. And creating content in a vacuum really sucks. It's really hard to do that because not only are you the one that's being relied upon to create all the content for the company, your creative bandwidth takes a hit. But also, sometimes what happens, you get too close to the creative and it's hard to break out of that and get to new plateaus or evolve the creative because you start getting into ruts. And one of the things that I've been doing is I've been meeting with a group of my friends to talk through business strategies and some of our goals with our personal projects moving forward. And I didn't know it at the time, but this has been like revolutionary for me as an individual because what it's done is not only helped me be more accountable, but it's also given me some outside opinion to help me get outside of what's too close to me, the things that I can't see, the spots that I have blinders on. So I would highly recommend if you have people in the creative space who can help you work through some of the things that you need to do, go ask them questions. See if they have time to meet together and talk through some of the struggles that you're having. And maybe they can give you some outside opinion. Now, take their advice and take it with a grain of salt, but also be open to receiving it because what we want to happen here is we want you to find the best idea. We want the best idea to win. And I can't remember the lady's name that I heard this from, but she had a really great quote, which was, be hard on the idea, easy on the individual. So to take criticism and to give criticism, one of the greatest things you can do is to be open to that, to give advice because you want the best idea to win, not that you're being critical of the person or the individual. And oftentimes I think when we're doing something creative, we can take it as criticism and it can hurt our feelings. But if we're open to it and we can listen to it, then oftentimes you might find that it can help you get to another place you didn't even know you could go, because somebody can help you see what you can't see. So just be open to it. Try to find somebody who can help you in your collaboration and in your creative pursuits. Going back a little bit to talking about some of the platforms you can use, obviously there's Canva, which I talked about, but there's also a platform called Fiverr and another one called Upwork. And those two are platforms you can go check out where there's freelance artists on there. So if you're looking for a graphic designer, if you're looking for brand guides, if you're looking for someone who can edit your videos or photography, those are great platforms to find individuals who do those things. Okay, so just to recap a little bit, we have make brand as important as the investment you make towards your album and your equipment. And number 2, your core brand and campaign branding, the differences there. And then how important collaboration can be for your music. I hope that helps everyone, and I'm so thankful to have you guys here. If it is helpful, please reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you. Leave me a comment. Ask me any questions you might have. I'd love for you to hit the like and subscribe button and follow along with this journey as we build out this platform. And till next time, y'all, go out there, make some cool stuff, and continue pursuing your dreams. So we'll catch you guys later.